This is Talking Drupal, a weekly chat about web design and development from a group of people with one thing in common. We love Drupal. This is episode 465, Greater Cleveland RTA. This episode of Talking Drupal is sponsored by Hero Devs. On today's show, we are talking about the Greater Cleveland RTA, how they use Drupal, and how they built a Drupal team with our guests, Mike Cermak and Rithya Lath. We'll also cover Geofield Directions as our module of the week. Welcome to Talking Drupal. Our guests today are Mike and Rithya. Mike is an 18-year veteran with the GC RTA. Mike is a second-generation transit employee and lifelong transit user by necessary choice. Growing up as a member of Gen X in the suburbs of New York City with a degree in public policy from the University of Buffalo, he got his start in technology with a Commodore 64 computer shared with his brothers. He's been a Drupal user for about 11 years. Rithya is a web developer that's been working with Drupal since 2013. He currently maintains and supports Drupal sites at the Greater Cleveland Regional Transit Authority, where his role encompasses a range of tasks, including site building, troubleshooting, occasional module and theme development, all as part of a two-person team. Mike and Rithya, thank you. Welcome to the show, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
I'm Nick Laughlin, founder at Light Development, and today my co-host is John Picozzi, solution architect at EPAM.
Hey everyone, I found Mike's intro interesting because I too had to share a computer with my brother. Matter of fact, my brother had gone to college and realized that a word processor would be better for him to be able to type his papers. So he first got I think it was a Brother word processor, and it had like one game on it that we like played, which I think was Tetris. And then he then went and bought a compact computer, to which then the gateway opened to AOL and the internet. So I can understand those humble beginnings and sharing devices with siblings.
And before we go to the module of the week, I'll just note that we don't have a guest host this week, but fear not, we will have one. Will we have one in the next episode, or is it a couple weeks break, John?
Maybe the next episode.
Yeah.
Maybe. Sure. Let's go with the next episode.
All right. And now to talk about our module of the week, let's turn it over to Martin Anderson, a senior solutions engineer at Acquia and a maintainer of a number of Drupal modules and recipes of his own. Martin, what do you have for us this week?
Thanks, Nick. Have you ever wanted to make it easy for visitors to your Drupal site to get directions to a location via Google Maps? There's a module for that. It's called Geofield Directions, and it was created in February of 2021 by Christopher Martin, who goes by CCJJ Martin. The recent releases are by Alan Chappell, who goes by General Redneck. It has a 1.0.1 version available, which is compatible with Drupal 8.8, 9, 10, and 11, according to Drupal.org. It is also officially listed as minimally maintained and maintenance fixes only, although, again, it is Drupal 11 ready. It does have security and test coverage, but doesn't have a lot in the way of documentation, not even a README within the project. It has one open issue, which is not a bug, and is currently in use by 26 sites, according to Drupal.org. Now, the module provides a new field formatter, so you can install it and then update a view mode to use Geofield Directions. Now, your content display will include a link to get directions via Google Maps. You can configure the text of the link, whether the link should open in a new tab, the magnification of the destination map, and more. The module also includes token support, so you can dynamically include things like the name of the location in the link text. I think the only downside I can see for this module is that because it's implemented as a formatter, you have to choose between the directions link or a map, where I could see a number of sites wanting to be able to show both of those. But let's go ahead and talk about Geofield Directions.
I actually have a question in regards to this module because being the public transit agency that we are, does it offer the opportunity for transit directions?
I would assume that that's probably dependent on whether or not Google has transit directions in, wherever the user is getting directions. Certainly most of the places I've traveled, I would say that's the case, but I'm not sure if how universally that's true.
I think we'll have to check that out because we've been providing our transit data to Google since roughly 2008.
Oh, wow. I have to be honest, I don't think it does, because the description does say that it's a single point. So it's probably more like you can say, here's our store, and then there's an easy link to click on to get there, rather than a route. I assume the transit directions is more about a full route, right?
Well, it would be routing on transit, but if it needs to involve multiple modes of transit to get there, it can certainly support that. So
yeah, I don't think this module handles that, but I'd be interested to know.
Question, and this might kind of piggybacks off of Mike's question, or maybe it helps to answer it, but like, it's a field formatter. Great. What's the input to the field? Is it a link to the directions page?
So, okay. So what it does, it's basically a formatter for a geofield, right? So it's, latitude and longitude coordinates. Okay. And then what it'll do is it'll put those into a link to a Google map. So it basically, the link, so the latitude and longitude go into a URL that when you click on it, tells Google Maps, hey, plot give me directions from where I am to this, geo point.
Okay, and then so it's using current location.
Exactly. Or you can, I'm sure, override that once you get there to say from a specific, beginning point.
So if it doesn't allow in the settings for you to say transit directions, I'm sure there is a URL parameter that Google will take to show you transit directions. So maybe somebody could develop a patch for that and add a little checkbox to the back end. That's interesting.
Hey, sorry, we may have a to-do item.
There you go. Look at that. We've already put you to work, and you've only been here for 5 minutes. In my head, I was thinking, like, how does it know where I am? What if I want directions between two different points? And I was overcomplicating, but that makes a lot more sense.
This has a dependency on the Geofield module, then? Okay.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It depends on the Geofield module. And, to your point, John, I'm pretty sure Google almost all the time knows exactly where you are anyway. Just like, if you're an iOS user, Apple probably does, but.
Yeah. Well, I was more thinking like sometimes and this is more me than maybe anybody else, or maybe other people do this too, but like before I'm traveling to a place, I'll look up places around and I'm like, oh, how far from my hotel is it? So it's never like I erase current location and I always type in whatever the location is. So it's never, it's never like from my, well, I won't say never, but anyway, that's more a me problem than a you problem.
Yeah, I did also want to mention that one of the other configuration options is called HTML attributes. And it's possible that if there is just a parameter that you need to pass for it to sort of default to public transit as the method that it's going to use for providing the directions, that you might be able to even just put it into the configuration there.
Okay.
Interesting.
I think we're going to have something to play with.
It's funny because I envisioned when you first mentioned this module as the module of the week, I actually envisioned it adding the directions to your website as opposed to like linking off to them. But I don't know.
I think the issue with adding the directions in is that would require API level access, and Google has gotten a little more strict about their API usage.
Yeah. I was also thinking like usability for a user when you try to embed Google stuff into your site is not always the greatest user experience. So the link off is probably nicer.
Cleaner. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll be interested to hear your guys' perspective once you've used this. Like, feel free to reach out and let us know. We'll give a quick shout out to our listeners so they can hear how you used it.
Great, thank you.
And thank you, Martin, as always, an on-topic module of the week. How can folks connect with you or suggest a module of the week?
We are always happy to get nominations for Module of the Week in the Talking Drupal channel of Drupal Slack, or folks can reach out to me directly as ManClue on all of the Drupal and social channels.
Great. See you next week.
See you then.
This episode of Talking Drupal is sponsored by Hero Devs. Let's talk about life after Drupal 7 end of life. Since August of 2023, there's been a lot of discussion around Drupal 7's official end of life in January of 2025. It's no secret that many companies, organizations, and individuals are still on Drupal 7 and have yet to migrate. I think we can all agree that migration, while beneficial, is not always feasible, and this is where Hero Devs comes in. Hero Devs has partnered with core team maintainers of Drupal 7 to build and maintain the Drupal 7 never-ending support product, ensuring the same quality of support you have come to expect over the years. Drupal 7 never-ending support, or NES, allows for an effortless transition, allowing your site to remain secure, compliant, and compatible after Drupal 7 goes end of life. This allows you to migrate on your own time or potentially not at all. Hero Devs promises to keep Drupal 7 alive and well, even offering support for the current top 100 Drupal 7 modules. If you'd like to know more about Drupal 7 never-ending support, visit herodevs.com. That's HERODEVS.com. All right, now onto our primary topic. Mike, let's start with you, and let's start with laying the foundation for our listeners. What does the Greater Cleveland RTA do?
We are the regional transit provider for the city of Cleveland, Ohio, and the surrounding communities of Cuyahoga County, Ohio. So basically the northeastern corner of the state. We are one of the largest providers in the state in one of the largest counties in the state.
Okay.
And I'm assuming that's a state agency. Is that correct? You're a governmental agency?
Not entirely a state agency. The way that we are structured is we are chartered by the state as an independent political entity. Basically, we operate under the guidance and direction of a board of trustees that is appointed by a combination of city and county government. They are our guiding force. And then the majority of our operating funding actually comes through a portion of county sales tax.
Oh, interesting.
Interesting.
So we operate somewhat independently of any of the constituent governments of the area we serve.
Interesting. So I think the buses in Rhode Island actually work similarly because a couple of months ago, the CEO of the transit authority there was doing something he shouldn't have and got in trouble and had to resign. And I was kind of like, oh, they have a CEO. That's interesting. I wonder why that is. And then I went down the rabbit hole. So that's interesting.
Yeah, we very much, I have a feeling we follow a similar sort of structure. The individual at the top of our organization, India Terry, is our chief executive officer and general manager. She occupies both of those roles.
Okay. I'm curious about what kind of digital services does the Greater Cleveland RTA provide?
Yeah, so we actually have 3 websites. So we have riderta.com, which is primarily for riders, but I mean, we also post things like board minutes, board meetings, etc. And then we have another website primarily for our procurement department. So it's basically a portal for posting, managing any procurement related activities like RFPs. And then our third one is actually our intranet. So it's more like the central hub and for internal communications, resources, documents, forms, and announcements to employees. So those are the 3 sites, but we've actually done some migration of our internal apps into our intranet and our external facing site, riderta.com. But those are our 3 primary sites. And we do provide a feed for developers as well. So the GTFS feed, which is the general transit feed specification. So this was developed by Google in a way that we can describe our current system through a set of files. So this will typically contain like stops, routes, times, so static scheduled data, and that's basically what apps or third-party developers would consume. And along with that is an extension of that feed, which is GTFS-RT, which stands for real time. And this is also available to determine where the buses are. So we actually partner with an agency, two agencies actually, the Transit app to consume our feed, the GTFS feed, and EasyFare to provide the mobile ticketing experience. So riders can plan their trip and they can pay their fare in an app.
Okay, so I want to dig into this piece of a little bit because it's a particular interest of mine. I worked on a couple apps that did some real-time tracking for that kind of thing. And I'm curious how often, and I don't know if this is something that you do on your team or somebody else, or nobody does this. I'd be very surprised if nobody does this. But how often are you comparing kind of real-time, real-world situations to the static schedule to see if there's room for improvement, room for change? Like where does that level of analysis come in?
That actually comes in within our service management department and our what's called our ITS department, which is Intelligent Transportation Systems.
Okay.
ITS is a relatively new initiative on our part, but it is allowing us to make more of those database decisions that are truly based on consumption of our services. But yes, we have folks down there who conduct periodic reviews of the services we provide, what's our schedule adherence look like, so that if we can improve our capabilities. We actually also did a complete redesign of our bus network just a few years ago to better align our services with the population that we serve. So that's not something that we would do on a very frequent basis, but I know that was the first one we had done in the entire time I've worked for the authority.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So yeah, sometimes you just have to look at it as a network and say, is this working? What do we need to do?
Yeah.
As opposed to the regular incremental changes that you make, because incremental change can lead you to a goal, but incremental change can also move you away from what maybe you originally envisioned.
Now, but before we get into the Drupal side of stuff, which is probably what the majority of our listeners are interested in, I'm curious about all the, because it sounds like you're managing a few different technologies. What takes up the most time throughout your day to day? Are you spending a lot of time managing kind of the real time stuff since it's relatively new, or has that been relatively static? Or are the apps, do you interact with the apps like that API?
Well, we do confine ourselves to the Drupal side of the house because that is more than enough of our time between the two of us.
I can imagine.
Yeah, between the ITS team and some of the other IT and MIS folks that we have, they have their own dedicated support staffs as well. But we try to keep everything all in one place, and we like Drupal to be that place.
Yeah, I will say there are areas on the transit system that I feel like Drupal could be used, but that's like the digital signage. But with the infrastructure setup that we have, we can't do that. So maybe something in the future, I don't know, but yeah.
So let's dive in with both feet then, and great segue to you both on our next question. How does the Greater Cleveland RTA use Drupal? It sounds like you have a few different websites, maybe some APIs. Is all of that stuff coming out of Drupal, or what's the specific use case that you guys find that you're using Drupal for?
Yeah, so I guess going through each of the sites, primarily riderta.com. I mean, that's mostly for schedules information, route information. There's other things like news and blogs. So we do have a few content editors there. So we have our marketing department, which handles some of the homepage announcements, the blogs. We have a news team that handles the press release. And I want to say, I think, Mike, are there other content editors? I feel like I'm missing. Oh, crisis. We have a crisis communication team as well. So, they post announcements through our primary website, writerta.com, along with the other channels as well. So.
Yeah, we actually had some issues last week or the week before with some of the storms that had come through here. It was pretty disruptive to our service. So being able to get those real-time updates, those instantaneous service changes to our writing public was paramount, because the situation was just evolving every time a new storm front came through here.
So to dig a little deeper, is Drupal purely just used as a web content management system? It's just, the marketing team is basically, and sorry, it sounds diminutive to say just, right, when you're talking about what Drupal is doing, but is it primarily being used for the marketing team to update content on the website, or are there APIs that are coming out of it to power? Somebody had talked about signage. Maybe it's not exactly the reader boards on platforms or at stops, but is it powering signage elsewhere via API and stuff like that?
At this point, it is very much the web content management piece of things. Really, I think that is largely driven by what the organization is comfortable with and capable of, and frankly, what we're capable of, being the two-man team that we are. We have more than enough demands on our time and resources. Not to say that I don't think we'll expand in some areas in the future, because what is being discovered is that it's a competent product, it's a powerful product, and some of the things that we've done with it have demonstrated to people what the possibilities are. So I think we're opening a few eyes.
Yeah, cool. And we're consuming the GTFS feed through on the homepage. There's a real-time widget there, so that allows a person to get text-based, not the visual piece, but get a drop down of what route are they riding, where's the direction and what stop are they at, and then it'll return the time on when their bus will arrive.
I was just going to comment on that widget too, because I just tried it out. It's fast, it's easy to use. It's a sign of a great widget, but you can very quickly see whether you're how far behind schedule your bus is or train, as well. Yeah, it's quick. It's
Thank
impressive.
You for the compliment.
I'm curious about how you came to Drupal and maybe when did the RTA get started using Drupal, and how was Drupal selected? Were you guys part of that decision?
Oh, yes. I can launch into that a little bit, because like I mentioned in my bio, I've been with the organization about 18 and a half years. The first few years that I was here, we were very much on a bespoke content management system in name only. I will not glorify it beyond that, because frankly, it was horrendous. We knew that we needed to move off of that. We knew that we needed to get ourselves more modernized. And we put an RFP out for a consultant to assist us with that process. We were not married to a technology at the time. I had explored Drupal a little bit in version 6 and had determined that, being the one-man show that I was at the time, we didn't have that capability. I'd explored WordPress. I saw that it was still very much a blog-rooted product, so I wasn't interested in going that route. But when we put the RFP out, we got a few responses. One was, again, a homegrown CMS, so we pretty well said, not going down that route again. One was, I believe, Joomla at the time, and looked attractive, but seemed to have some limiting factors. And then the third respondent actually came to us with what was by then a Drupal 7 solution. The great thing was, when they came to us, they presented to us not static screenshots. They actually were able to walk us through a mocked up site that they had built.
Oh, wow.
That ultimately, after we chose them, after we engaged with them, the site that was delivered was really, really close to what they had originally proposed. So I think that spoke to the capabilities of Drupal and the job that they did in selling us on this was an extendable technology. Rithya had joined the organization as an intern earlier on. And so we were both absolutely involved in the process, involved in the selection, involved with the vendor from a development and stand-up standpoint. They trained us up on the product. They set us loose. And since then, we've been very self-educated. I think we've come a really long way. And I will say I'm proud of where we've come on our own, because it's been a heck of a trip, but it's really been exciting.
Yeah. And I think, at the first time we were just like curious site builders poking around, figuring things out, like even learning the terminology within the framework was, a thing of its own. So me and Mike were like passing resources back and forth. Oh, this is what a node is, or this is what taxonomy is. So, it took a while, but we got a grasp of it. And then, there comes points where you're like, okay, I need to change the way this looks. Where does this live?
Anybody remember the bean module? Block entities aren't nodes.
Yeah.
The minute that we got into blocks and entities and nodes, I'm like, my head is spinning. Please make it stop.
Yeah.
I remember being. I never really fully dove into that ecosystem, but yeah, it was powerful first time. I'm curious. Can you share who your partner was at that time?
I was going to ask that question.
Building prototypes.
It was actually a company out of Chicago, consultancy firm named Crow Horvath, that I believe has since rebranded themselves to Crow Incorporated. But we had a couple folks over there. Jeannie Owens was the principal who worked with us, and my understanding is she's still with the organization. Jeannie, if you're out there at this point, we owe you a debt of gratitude, because we're still working with what you gave us, and I think we've gone pretty far. So I think she'd be proud of the seeds that she planted here.
Awesome. Yeah. I'm always curious about that, because I think Drupal organizations have, especially mid to larger agencies, have started prototyping sites pretty extensively. But even in Drupal 7 days, to get an actual prototype, I think that was on the early end. I mean, that was bleeding edge. So glad that worked out for you guys.
Yeah. Well, trust me, so are we.
Yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
I was going to say, we're still using the structure that they built for us. I mean, we're on Drupal 10 right now, 10.3. So, I mean, as far as like the content types and everything, it's pretty much laid out the same, the way that they, set it up for us. So they did a wonderful job at that.
Awesome.
I will say it's not that we didn't have missteps, because when we first launched the site, I will admit it was my ego that said, oh, yeah, no, we can host this in-house. Oh, we can host this on Windows. The looks on your faces. I learned in a matter of hours how bad of an idea that was. And we backed off, and Crow helped us to find an appropriate hosting platform. And it really only delayed our launch about 30 days.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And where are you hosted right now? Because it's
We are with a company called Liquid Web.
Okay. I'm familiar with them.
They've been very helpful to us. They've been very good in helping us grow.
I'm having flashbacks to the one and only Drupal site that I tried to host on IIS, and it was not an enjoyable experience. So much so that anytime anybody asks me about Drupal hosting on Windows, I just go, no, you shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. So I'm going to go down this rabbit hole a little bit because there's a funny story, and I may have told this story before to longtime listeners, but I went to visit this client's office, and they were like, "Oh yeah, Drupal's great," and they're like, can we host it on Windows? And like, I'd never done it before, so I like kind of read up, and I was like, yeah, you can. Usually, it's a Linux environment. And we were touring their on-site server environments room, basically, and they were like, "Oh, here are all our servers, and there's a Linux server." And I go, "Oh, is that where the Drupal site will be hosted?" And they go, "Oh no, we're going to host you on one of these Windows machines. The Linux server is only for email spam filtering." And I was like. But we really, it would be better if we hosted on. They're like, no, we're going to use one of these IIS machines. It'll be fine. A long time later, the site finally got up, but was fraught with problems. Anyway,
a dear departed friend of mine who had a career as a Hollywood cameraman had a tendency to coin a phrase, and you always knew what he was talking about when he said this. He would say, "Well, you could do it that way." And just the tone of his voice would speak volumes. It's you could, but oh my, you shouldn't.
Yeah, that's definitely I think we've expanded on Drupal on Windows as much as we need to for one episode. So back when to give listeners a little bit of insight, our friends at the Drupal Association actually connected us with Mike and said it would be great for Mike to come on because he has a super interesting project and a super interesting story as to kind of how he built a Drupal team to service the Greater Cleveland RTA, right? But so, Mike, I want to dive into that a little bit more and talk about the team. You've already mentioned, it's a team of two. You may have mentioned, and I think I might have missed how long the team has existed.
We've existed as a team for about 12, 13 years now.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. I came in 18 and a half years ago. I was very much a team of one, limping us along with what we had. And then when we had the opportunity to bring in an intern, Rithya came on board, and it was good fortune and confluence of events that said he had the skill set, he had the interest, and we had the budget line item to bring in another headcount. That when his internship concluded, I was like, "So, are you interested?"
And here I am today.
Since then, I have jokingly said I will duct tape him to his chair if he attempts to leave.
That's awesome. And so, just as a scope of work, I did notice Rithya said that you were on 10.3. You got the site; it was on 7. So, have you guys been updating, maintaining the sites from 7 to 10?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's just us two. We did the migration, learning the migration API and going from 7 to, I think, Mike, did we
skipped version 8?
We skipped 8. Okay, we went to 9, and we had so many modules installed on 7. It probably made it very difficult because I think it was maybe 200, maybe a little bit more modules, but we needed to find some way to migrate the functionality too. I mean, a lot of it was taken through the migrate API, the files and some of the entities and everything like that. But I mean, there's always those cases where you're like, all right, how do I do this? And it was more so just exporting it, using views to export it to a CSV and just working from there. So, I mean, we had a mixture of even doing some manual entry on the end because it was just so many loose ends that we had to tie in, and it took maybe 8 months or so, from learning it into actually doing the whole migration itself. So
now I will say I was going to say, in our defense, with the modules that we had on 7, the vast majority of them were 9 and 10 compatible. So it speaks to what our choices were in the past, that we had a philosophy of very much pick the modules that have community support, pick the modules that have a wide range of applicability, so that we weren't doing these one-trick ponies, and every time we had a new use case come up, we said, okay, what do we need for this? What do we need for that? No, what can we do with what we already have? So I think that good foundation yields good output.
Reducing that custom code footprint is really a big benefit.
And just to be clear, no need to defend yourself. 200 modules on Drupal 7 on a moderately complex site is nothing. I have clients that have between 300 and 600 modules. So, But how about the skill and responsibility breakdown between the two of you? Because Rithya, you mentioned kind of a broad spectrum in your bio or your intro of what you do, but how do you guys break down responsibilities? Kind of maintaining stuff. Is one of you more front end, one of you more back end?
I think with us, it probably is more of a strategic tactical breakdown. I probably operate a little more at the strategic level, the 10,000 foot view. Rithya's technical skills make mine pale by comparison. I will freely admit that as things have moved along and I've gotten more into the fabric of the organization, I've probably gotten away from some of the day-to-day tech. Not to say that I can't write Twig when I need to. I certainly can get under the hood when it's necessary, but I feel much more comfortable having somebody like Rithya with me, where if I say, here's what we need to do, how do we get here?
Yeah, and I think it came from, like I said, being a curious site builder, because at the first time, just pointing and clicking, but you really want an understanding of the framework itself, and doing a whole redesign and a migration. I mean, even doing composer commands before when we first started, I didn't even have those skill sets. So that's how I basically just dive in and started learning, and we were just sharing resources back and forth. So, and I kind of took that more of a back end role and do some front end as well. I mean, pretty much did the redesign of Writer RTA. So there's a mixture of both there, back end and front end on my part.
We do also have very much of a hand in glove relationship with our marketing department, because from a visual standpoint, they absolutely have a comprehension of what they're looking to achieve, what they're looking to accomplish. And then we go ahead and do some of those things the Drupal way.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's very much like a solution architect, development team lead relationship, where Mike is kind of bringing in the business requirements and talking through kind of the ins and outs because of the the years of service, and then Rithya is kind of taking it from a development standpoint and going, all right, well, we can do it with this set of modules and hit 95% of the feature set, or we can use this set of modules plus a custom module and hit 100%. What do you want to do?
Yeah.
So that sounds like a pretty awesome working environment and relationship.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So let's dive into a little bit of the kind of, I don't know, nuts and bolts, I guess, from like a local development environment and deployment pipeline aspect, right? So what are you guys using for local development? And then what does the deployment pipeline look like?
Yeah, so I want to start off, I guess, first, like going back to the beginning, because that was using like WAMP, starting off there. And that's when like Docker containers and everything started exploding, coming out of the scene. And then I was creating my own containers and trying to manage that and putting Xdebug and configuring all that. Things were working, but then something like broke. And I spent a lot of time just trying to configure that itself. And then like Lando started coming out. So I was playing with Lando and now into DDEV, which, just, where you run a couple commands and you're up and running. So I recently just started playing with DDEV like 2 months ago. So I'm pretty new to that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm going to have Rithya bring me up to speed on DDEV because I think that's something I definitely need to be looking more into myself. I will say, too, from an infrastructure standpoint, what I mentioned with Liquid Web, yes, they've been an absolutely great partner with us, great provider for us. We are exploring at this point moving our infrastructure into more of a platform as a service provider. So we'll be looking at hopefully releasing an RFP for that before the end of the year and evaluating some of the capabilities that are out there, because we've realized with only having a two-man team, there are certain aspects of the infrastructure that we really need to hand off more, and we need to be more agile. We need to be more nimble in spinning up things like development environments, spinning up things like prototypes. And that's the sort of thing that a platform provider can hopefully help us with. Yeah,
so it's kind of a manual approach on our end. Once we're doing the developing and testing and pushing it out to the environments, we don't have that automated pipeline. So like Mike said, we want it, we're looking into the platform as a service as an option for us to, have all that baked into there. So that's hopefully we get onto that next year or so.
Yeah, I think you'll love that once you get there. I mean, the three big ones, Pantheon, Acquia, and Platform SH, all provide kind of out of the box multiple environments and give you really easy ways. I think one of the biggest advantages of them isn't just that you get the dev stage in production, but they make it easy to refresh a lower date environment, right? Because with a company like Liquid Web or any other more standard web hosting company, you can set up multiple environments, but then you end up having scripts or things like that where you have like, okay, I need to refresh this environment and copy this code and do all this stuff. Whereas with with Acquia, at least the last time I was using it heavily, you just drag a database between environments and it just works. With Pantheon, you fill out a little form that you say, like, I want to repopulate this from the staging environment or the production environment. With Platform SH, you just click a button to sync it and it just happens, right?
I am a big fan of things that just work. Yeah. I like to know how they work, but I appreciate when they don't break.
I even go as far as, like, I host my personal site with Pantheon, and they actually have an update. Like, they'll do automatic updates where you can hit a button and it'll run basically a composer update, is what I assume it's doing under the hood. And it'll show you what it's updating, and it says, hey, do you want to update it? And you can do that on your dev environment, test it all out, make sure everything works right, and then you can just move it right along. Like, I update my site now in like an hour versus like having to pull the code down and do it and test it and all that stuff. So there are a lot of benefits to a lot of those services.
Yeah, so we actually done some pilot projects using, I want to say it was a platform.sh, because we were looking into a learning management system. And for us being the Drupal specialists or experts in our area, we said, let's look at what Drupal solutions are there. So we ran into a distribution, I want to say, I think it's Opigno.
Yep.
So we ran that internally. We had the group, give it a test run to get a feel for it. So, that was running for a good, I want to say like 6 months or so. But that just stayed as a pilot project. And I mean, we spun up some other sites. I think even testing the newest when D10 was coming up, and just getting a feel for the lay of the land. So I mean, those are awesome sandboxes to play in.
So I want to turn back to something that you've mentioned a couple times, Rithya. You mentioned early on. Sorry, I'm going to step back for a second. This show feels very nostalgic for me, even though this is the first time I've met you guys, because I'm hearing my own route to where I am today in your experience. You mentioned a couple times learning by point and click, which is also how I learned. But I feel like Drupal itself is moving a little faster than you can kind of keep that up, and it's a little bit more sophisticated now. I'm curious, how do you manage keeping on top of things nowadays? Are there particular how do you do that? How do you keep up to date?
Yeah, I mean, definitely the resources out there from the various blogs. I mean, YouTube in itself, the Drupal Association, following all these, content creators and getting some insight on how they do things. Listening to Dries talk about the upcoming, updates, attending DrupalCon, because, I've attended, I want to say, since maybe in Austin, Texas. I think that was like 2000. Maybe 16.
Austin was our first one.
Yeah. So yeah,
it was my first one too.
Was it? All right.
Old home days, guys.
Yeah. So I mean, just keeping up with the community and talking to some folks. So that's generally how I keep up to date, because it's like you said, it's an evolving scene and things just keep on moving. So.
And we absolutely listen to podcasts like Talking Drupal.
Yeah.
Glad to hear it.
I'm sorry. Sorry to hear that.
The community resources have been fantastic, and the community as a whole, I have to say that from attendance at DrupalCon, from interactions like this, you feel like you found your people, and you feel just a level of comfort, a level of familiarity that says, we're all in this thing together. We all have common goals in mind. We may, as providers, folks may compete against each other once in a while, but at the end of the day, there is the commonality of, hey, we're all surrounding this product and we're all trying to make this product better for the benefit of everybody. So in that respect, the rising tide lifts all boats.
Absolutely. I mean, I always go back to that for whenever I go back and compare Drupal to other open source, even other communities, WordPress, Joomla, like Drupal's ethos is to provide a module back to the community to do something. The WordPress ethos is to create a custom plugin that has some sort of paid service. And while that does allow some, there's positives to both approaches. The positive on the WordPress side is if you pay for something, you can generally get direct support from the developers for something, right? Which is a little bit more difficult in Drupal. It's a lot more, it's more volunteer based. So you have to be willing to put your own work in sometimes, which I think is also sometimes an advantage. It's sometimes easier to fix something yourself. But also the Drupal, the core team, I think one of the things that they do a great job of is making sure that they're balancing the needs of the whole community when they're putting things in, right? And if they didn't, we wouldn't have things like the robust caching system, the robust image handling system, right? So you kind of have, the best of both worlds. You have a great community putting stuff in, you have great stewards making sure that the things that everybody needs are getting in and maintained and cared for. But yeah, I share a lot of the same perspective.
We're smart, we're good looking, and gosh darn it, our moms like us.
So let's talk a little bit more about day-to-day responsibilities, right? So we talked about kind of the migration from Drupal 7 to Drupal 9. Now you're on 10, right? And of course, like now that you're on 10, the upgrade path is a lot, dare I say, easier, right? To go from 10 to 11 to 12 into, the future. But I imagine as a two-person Drupal shop, you already said that you're doing, POCs or prototypes for things, right? I imagine you're probably doing feature enhancements as well. Like, what does your day-to-day look like? Is it a compilation of feature enhancements and support? Is it mostly support? Like, how does that break down?
Yeah, so it is a mixture. I mean, sometimes we get things, we come and we get bug fixes, and we have projects that we have to work towards. Like we're doing a restructuring of our major projects page, which is a bunch of static pages, to make it more structured. We're working with the engineering and planning department to create something more visually appealing. Has all the structured fields laid out, because it's just been a growing, I don't want to say a mess, but it's not as organized. So, and also we want them to maintain the content. I mean, ultimately, that's what they should be doing. So we're trying to get in the business of still doing that, because, you know, they are not necessarily content creators, but at the same time, you know, they have to be responsible and accountable for the, you know, content that's being put out there. So it's best that they handle it.
There's also very much an audience education and evangelism piece going on, because as an organization, as an internal community, particularly as relates to our intranet, which is running Drupal, is now integrated with our Microsoft Active Directory in terms of authentication, security. So if you're not a Microsoft authenticated user, you're not getting in. But that gives us that anytime, anywhere, any device capability of providing information. But there are departments in the organization that maybe aren't familiar with that, aren't as comfortable with that, because they've been accustomed to the idea of, if we have an announcement, we thumbtack a piece of paper to a bulletin board and people read it as they're walking past. It's what they do. It's what they've always done. Well, the workplace doesn't necessarily act like that any longer. The workplace doesn't exist like that any longer. We have a large portion of our workforce that actually doesn't see the inside of an office, the inside of a facility, because we'll have bus operators, rail operators who they may do their shift changes at a bus stop somewhere. They may do their shift change at a rapid station somewhere. So they're not necessarily coming into a physical facility, but communication with them, engagement with them is at least as important, if not more so. So being able to extend our information out to the edges of this diverse organization that we have, and our workforce is overturning. We're celebrating our 50th year of existence at the end of this year. We have some folks who have been with us 30 years, 40 years or more, but we have a large quantity of folks who have been here 5 years or less. The 5 year or less crowd, they grew up with technology. They have more technology in the palm of their hand than previously existed in an entire data center. So being able to touch them again where they are is important to us.
Yeah, now that you mentioned the 50th anniversary, Mike, that's another project that we have to work on too, with marketing and getting a landing page and getting that whole campaign up and running. So there's a lot of other things too, like low-hanging fruit, for example, like jQuery. I mean, we have some dependency on jQuery from moving from 7 to 10. It's still there, but I have to, get that into using vanilla JS. So it's not something that immediately needs to be done, but it's definitely one of those low-hanging fruit items that we need to do as a community, because I know we're using modules that still depend on jQuery too. So.
Hey, better exposed filters, newer versions don't have any dependency on jQuery anymore. And that's a big one. I mean, Stephen Musgrave did a lot of work, I think, to get that out there. But that's one of those things that end users never notice. But I have been getting a lot of satisfaction removing jQuery as much as I can. But
and we use a lot in our 7 environment, so I mean, it worked. It worked.
Well,
but
I also want to mention that the person that maintains jQuery does communicate with the Drupal core team and tries to coordinate some stuff and some LTS to make it easier for us. So he's been a great jQuery is great. He's been a great partner with the Drupal community, but the truth is vanilla JS can handle a lot of what we needed it for in the past. Got a couple of questions. I think the last one you had mentioned going to DrupalCon. I don't know if you were at the most recent one, but the most recent one, Dries talked about Starshot. And I'm curious what you guys think about Starshot, if you are getting involved.
I was out there in Portland for the Starshot announcement, and I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was exactly what the organization and the community needed to hear right now, because one of the things, the core thing that it will help us to overcome is what I call the blank page problem. that folks don't know what Drupal is capable of, we can explain to them. When I get approached about something and can Drupal do this, my response is Drupal can do almost anything when it comes right down to it. Okay, how quickly can you demonstrate to me what Drupal can do in this regard? Well, that's going to take a little bit of work. We're having the Starshot initiative getting us more into the better out-of-the-box experience, quicker, non-technical user experience, I think, is going to be tremendous.
Yeah, so I think too, looking at the market too in general, and I think it's exciting because, you know, looking at competitors, I'm not like Wix, like these drag and drop builders, Squarespace, Webflow, you know, when people are viewing now Drupal's name can be in that mix too, because we have this whole experience builder that makes it, you know, easier for users to do things and get up and running without, you know, having a developer run composer commands or just commands. So I think that's awesome. That's fantastic.
Yeah, but it brings us back to the roots of being able to learn Drupal again as a point clicker, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, especially since Drupal 8, but definitely in Drupal 10, like, you can't learn Drupal the way you and I learned Drupal.
Yeah.
You can't get it installed on some server somewhere and just point and click your way to a full functioning site. You have to understand what Composer is. You generally have to know Git. You'd have to, like, there's just a lot of developer centric stuff that, as a developer, I love them. They make my job of maintaining stable Drupal, powerful Drupal sites better. The Drupal community is better for using those, but you can't learn Drupal the way that you used to. And if we can get back to a world where both are true, you know, you can have stable platforms on Drupal and new people can get into Drupal learning it by point and click. I think that's a lofty goal. I think we'll get there.
When Dries mentioned a vision of having a Simply Test style experience of, you know, pick the things you want, click a button, and hey, here's your environment. I thought it's a lofty goal. I have a lot of faith in the community. I have a distinct feeling that we will get something close to that, if not that, because rolling back a little bit to the Kennedy approach with the moonshot, failure is not an option.
Yeah.
I think, like, the way you guys work though, Mike, you're already there, right? So like using DDEV as a starting point, right? And coupling that with recipes, like, you could very easily be in a place where, you know, within, I don't know, 4-ish commands on the command line, you could have a working Drupal site up on a local environment for you know, a preview to somebody pretty quickly.
We are definitely better than many in that regard.
Yeah, I mean, where it falls apart is for like the average user or the non-technical user, right? Where it's like, okay, what? I got to run commands? Like, what?
Yeah.
Okay, we're approaching the close of the show. Before we do, I'd like to ask both of you. Let's start with you, Mike. Is there anything you'd like to share with our listeners about the RTA?
Well, I mentioned before that we are coming up on our 50th anniversary, and as an organization, you know, we are one of the leading transit providers within the state, and I like to think that we are paving the way for some of the practices that we have, some of the technologies we've put in place. I know that we have been approached occasionally over the course of our journey through Drupal by other agencies that have been looking to update their websites. So I found that very flattering. You know, we're just keeping on.
And how about you, Rithya? Anything you'd like to add?
I will just say, when is DrupalCon coming to Cleveland?
That there. Do what they will with that.
I actually have possible designs on seeing if we can pursue that at some point in the future, because I'd love to get you all to Cleveland at some point.
I would be more than happy to come to Cleveland. I hear Cleveland rocks.
Indeed, it
As said
does.
as said by Drew Carey.
The Rock Hall is actually undergoing a major expansion at this point. So by the time DrupalCon gets here, I expect that to be done, and I am sure the Rock Hall will be one of the destinations that folks would love to get a look at.
Yeah.
Awesome. Anyway, Mike and Rithya, thank you for joining us. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank you. This has been wonderful.
Do you have questions or feedback? Reach out to Talking Drupal on Twitter with the handle Talking Drupal, or by email with show@talkingdrupal.com. You can connect with our hosts and other listeners on Drupal Slack in the Talking Drupal channel.
And you can promote your Drupal community event on Talking Drupal. You can learn more at talkingdrupal.com/tdpromo.
Get the Talking Drupal newsletter to learn more about our guest hosts, show news, upcoming shows, and much more. Sign up for the Talking Drupal newsletter at talkingdrupal.com/newsletter.
And thank you, patrons, for supporting Talking Drupal. Your support is greatly appreciated. You can learn more about becoming a patron at talkingdrupal.com and choosing the Become a Patron button. All right, Mike, if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, they had any questions, what's the best way for them to do that?
If they drop an email over to webmaster@gcrta.org, that will actually come to a shared mailbox that comes to both of us.
All right. And Rithya, if people want to get in touch with you?
I would say the same thing. Filters to both of us.
Awesome. And John, how about you?
You can find me on all the major social networks and Drupal.org @John Picozzi. And you can find out about EPAM at epam.com.
And you can find me pretty much everywhere at Nixvan, NICXVAN.
And if you've enjoyed listening, we've enjoyed talking. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.